Today is June 16th, it is almost Juneteenth, and I apologize for no clips today. I was very busy making a Yu-Gi-Oh video. If you want to watch that one, I'm a big nerd. My channel is the Yu-Gi-Oh Scrub. Enough plugging of my other channels. I want to do a couple things today. First, you can sit back, relax, put in your headphones or just to listen to the video real quick because I want to do a little bit of reading. Now, I have two books in front of me right here. Some that you probably have heard of. The first, a classic, 1984, my notes inside of it. I like to take notes as I read sometimes. I think it is pretty cool. The other, White Fragility by DiAngelo. Now, I'm going to start with a little bit of the foreword of White Fragility. So, it is right in the very, very beginning. You have to think, this is literally some of the first words you are reading when you pick up this book. So, let's get right to it. The foreword is written by Michael Eric Dyson. I'm not going to read the whole thing, just a couple of sections. One metaphor for race and racism won't do. They are, after all, exceedingly complicated forces. No, we need many metaphors, working in concert even in different areas of the culture through a clever division of linguistic labor. Race is a condition, a disease, a card, a plague, original sin. For much of American history, race has been black culture's issue. Racism, a black person's burden. Or substitute any person of color for black, and you've got the same problem. Whiteness, however, has remained constant. In the equation of race, another metaphor for race beckons. Whiteness is the unchanging variable. Or, to shift metaphors, whiteness has been, to pinch Amari Bakara's resonant phrase, the changing same, a highly adaptable and fluid force that stays on top no matter where it lands. This is where I wanted to really read. In a sense, because this just sounds white supremacist AF. In a sense, this is Michael Eric Dyson's words. Whiteness is at once the means of dominance, the end to which dominance points, and the point of dominance to which, in its purest form, in its greatest fantasy, never ends. So, in that little section right there, I'm going to read a little bit more after this, but Michael Eric Dyson is basically saying that whiteness is the pinnacle of everything, according to him. Now, he is saying that it is, like the next sentence, to be sure, like the rest of race, whiteness is fiction. So, he goes right on to say, it is a fiction, race, and I do kind of believe this too. Like Martin Luther King said, we shouldn't be seeing race. I think it is identifiable characteristics that we carry down in our genes, but we are all humans, and if we are actually talking about the race or species, that's it. We're humans. We have brains, our bodies work the same. It's really simple in my eyes, but Rama DiAngelo and Michael Eric Dyson, they want you to see race. And you know what? There are times in this book, and it's why it's really powerful, they make compelling arguments that sound like they could be true. But unfortunately, they're using your empathy to manipulate you and get you to see people based on race and then judge people based on it. And that just is not good. Right here, I wanted to read. DiAngelo bravely challenges the collapse of whiteness into national identity. No less an authority than Beyonce Knowles recently remarked, it's been said that racism is so American that when we protect racism, some assume we are protest racism, we are protesting America. DiAngelo proves that Beyonce is right, that the flow of white identity into American identity, of racist beliefs into national beliefs, must be met head-on with a full-throated insistence that what it means to be American is not what it means to be white, at least not exclusively or even primarily. Absolutely agree there. There's no correlation between what it means to be American and what it means to be white, because being white means nothing. Firstly, very clear evidence is we have immigrants for decades now trying to come to America. They want to be American. They're not trying to come and be white. They're coming and trying to be American. So yes, there's a very big difference between being American and being white. They want you to think they're one and the same nowadays, and that being patriotic is being white supremacist. You can just see this in the escalating rhetoric if you actually follow the news. But the bigger point is, what being American really means, and I will not deny, yes, it was a lot of white men typically who were voting. Women and black people could not vote for many, many years up until 1965, and then women's suffrage was a little bit earlier in the 1920s. But the whole idea being, it was these white men who created the American values, specifically American values, not white values, American values that through, and they're Judeo-Christian, if you actually look at it all, it tends to be, yes, these Judeo-Christian American values were the things that allowed for, I've said it before, a war to be fought, the bloodiest on American soil, to end slavery, and have a civil rights era. If it wasn't for those American values of individuality and justice for all, we would not be able to have changed where we stood. We would, I'm not saying we still would have slavery, but again, it's the American values. And so I agree with Michael Eric Dyson. It is different, and we have to separate what it means to be white, nothing, and what it means to be American, everything. Being American means freedom. It means justice, individuality, liberty. It is classical liberalism. Look it up. Not being a liberal, because that's the thing. Just because you're a liberal doesn't make you good nowadays. It's like, you're not a conservative. Okay, look up where liberal comes from. It's classical liberalism. It's people who believe in liberty for the individual. Now, finished up with the white fragility. I want to read a small section of 1984 right here, because this kind of goes along with what I think is going on right now with a lot of the people who are more likely, in my eyes, to agree with white fragility. This is when Winston, the main character, is talking to Julia. They have just fornicated, and he's observing some things about her. It's about halfway through the book, page 129 in this edition, if you ever want to look. If he persisted in talking of such subjects, she had a disconcerting habit of falling asleep. She had one of those people who can go to sleep at any hour and any position. Talking to her, he realized how easy it was to present an appearance of orthodoxy while having no grasp whatever of what orthodoxy meant. In a way, the worldview of the party imposed itself most successfully on people incapable of understanding it. They could be made to accept the most flagrant violations of reality because they never fully grasped the enormity of what was demanded of them, and were not sufficiently interested in public events to notice what was happening. That's all I need to read from there. Now, I'll also say, the leftists, the people who agree with white fragility, they will probably say the exact same thing about the right. They'll say, you don't see, you need to be learning, and you see it all the time. Go and do the work, and then you'll basically realize that, yes, everything is racist about being American. I disagree with that. But what I think is really powerful is basically saying most people, and I think this is true, don't really understand. They don't want to put in the time to really understand. I think of it like a church, where if you had someone, you have the preacher, the person whose entire life is learning the Bible, and they're going to go up there and preach. Okay, cool, that's their job, absolutely fine. But most of the people who are listening to that person talk, yes, they might say they are Christians, or Jews, or Islamic. I mean, again, if it's church, it's Christian, but I mean, whatever religion it is. You might identify under that religion, but you might not be beholden or know every single line of the Bible and know every little tenet that it entails. Well, that's basically this. I mean, Robin DiAngelo writing White Fragility, Michael Eric Dyson, these are the preachers. A lot of people are just simply the Julias. Someone sitting there and you can be like, yo, you realize that by saying white people have white privilege, you are inherently being racist because you are claiming something based on someone's race. You are making a generalization about race. That is, by definition, in my eyes, racist. They don't see it. They physically cannot comprehend it, or they just do not care. They, kind of like Julia, fall asleep. I know a lot of people who just kind of walk away. Frankly, I think it's a lot of times, they're kind of like children. You start pressing their buttons a little bit and poking and making them really think and actually presenting some evidence to them, and they just go, oh my god, I can't handle this, and they run away. Unfortunately, it's sad, and I don't really know what to do about it besides continuing to make videos. And I would always say, make videos like this too. If you are someone like me, young, and you think that you see these events taking place that are going to create a worse world, well, speak up. Do something about it. Do whatever you can. I'm not saying go and be violent. Never, never, ever be violent. But use your voice. Words are the most powerful thing. I'm going to keep going, though, because I want to actually get to some content. Let's look at this. So, you may have heard Biden was meeting Putin. And we have this story right here. So, he met him today. This was from yesterday. Mr. President, are you ready for tomorrow? A reporter asked. I'm always ready, President Biden said. I don't know why, I just read this and I really wished he just said I was born ready. Because it would have been just a classic, like, line from an action movie and just old man Biden being like, I was born ready, like he's gonna go and box Putin. I think it would have been really funny, but nope, Biden's always ready. Is he really? Because there was a video that came out today that showed him needing note cards or flashcards while he's sitting right next to him. Also, Biden was cross-legged, and you could literally look at the body language of these two men and see that one, I truly believe Putin seemed way more comfortable and in control. Whatever, not gonna speak too much on it, body language. Some people are just, they're different in their body language. I don't think it's a telltale of everything about a person. But he did need flashcards, so were you really always ready, Joe Biden? Let's keep going, though. This is a quote from a Wall Street Journal article. Mr. Putin denied that Russia has played a role in the spate of increasingly bold cyber attacks against U.S. institutions and said it was the United States that is the biggest offender. So he denied everything. Of course, why would you not deny it? I don't really know how America has proof that it was the Russians. Maybe an IP address, but I mean, is it the Russian government? Could just be someone, could literally be an American with a VPN or anyone with a VPN. The Russian leader also appeared to give short shrift to what Mr. Biden had said was a key objective of the talks, to establish some, quote, guardrails that would make some kinds of attacks on critical infrastructure off limits in peacetime. The reason I have this is, are we in peacetime? We literally, I think if you look at what warfare would be nowadays, I think we are in the middle of warfare. It's a Tim Pool point, and so if you know Tim Pool, shout out. But we would not be invading another country. I mean, unless it was the most severe option possible. But most well-established countries, no, you cannot just go and invade someone else's land and then be portrayed on an international scale as the non-aggressor. I mean, Israel kind of does, but really, I still think that is a different story, but Palestine kind of is the aggressor in there. Idea being, though, war is not going to look the same as it used to, and I think it is naive to think that it would look exactly the same. I think it is way more likely that war would be done by cyber attacks, taking out critical infrastructure. So to say we should probably halt that during peacetime, well, I'd love to say that, but what does peacetime look like anymore? I don't even know. For all I know, I think this is the middle of war. Another quote, though. Mr. Biden has argued that the world is at a, quote, inflection point with an existential battle underway between democracy and autocracy. But with Mr. Putin at the vanguard of the autocrats, the American leader faced criticism from some quarters for even taking part in the summit. Alright, so autocracy, if you do not know, is just a government run by one person. Alright. Well, although it's not one person, I know someone was happy about the idea that Russia and Putin are the leader of the autocrats. So that is Xi Jinping. Granted, although he's done a whole lot to make sure he is the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, it still is a party, technically. But really what I'm focused on more here is just the idea of uniparty control. Whether it's the Chinese Communist Party, whether it's Vladimir Putin and his allies, or whether it's the Democratic Party. I fear when any major institution, federal government, CCP, or whatever, takes too much power and can hold it. And frankly, I think that what we're seeing, especially when you look at how the big tech corporations and social media seem to work right alongside the Democrats, it kind of feels like we aren't necessarily in a democracy anymore. Now, I'm not asserting anything about the actual election, but it doesn't really feel like, at the very least, even whatever the American people want, well, we're beholden to a global, population now. Our elected leaders would rather benefit the globe and themselves than America. And that's why America First politicians are becoming more important, more popular, because at a certain point, I think you have to focus on yourself and not the whole world. Although I would love a world government with everything being awesome and peace, it's a very utopian idea, and I just don't think we can have it, at least right now. Maybe in the future with decentralized money like Bitcoin, because it would just make everything a bit easier, because people would be trading in the same currency, and it would take out that currency war aspect of it all. But honestly, I don't really think that's happening. Now, another quote. If Russia is the enemy, then what organizations will America support in Russia? Mr. Putin asked. I think that it's not those who strengthen the Russian Federation, but those that contain it, which is publicly announced goal of the United States. Alright, so apparently we're going to do everything to contain Russia. Well, I present you evidence that Biden is a Russian agent, just like Donald Trump was. He is also a Russian agent. Biden under fire from Congress for waiving sanctions on a Russian gas pipeline company. Republicans accused Biden of placating German Chancellor Angela Merkel and handing Russian President Vladimir Putin a geopolitical win. Alright, being hyperbolic, I do not think Biden is truly a Russian agent, but when you combine that story with this that you've probably heard before, because it was a couple of weeks ago, Keystone XL pipeline halted after Biden blocks permit. He blocks a pipeline that was giving thousands upon thousands of Americans jobs. And Canadians. North America. Jobs for Americans. More energy independence. Halts it. Why would he release sanctions? Like, it does seem like he's doing stuff to benefit Russia. Now, I do not think that's actually the whole goal. But it makes no sense. Why are you making us less energy independent, getting rid of our jobs and closing a pipeline, but opening up another one with Russia? It's crazy. I don't get how people can look at everything going on and suddenly think that Biden is the master and the thing that's going to fix everything in America. I, again, will never say Trump was the better guy, but if you actually see, do you think Trump would have handled this Putin summit better? I personally think so. The media probably would have ripped into him saying he's a Russian asset for even talking to him, but what are you going to do? You got to eventually be the president. Now, right here, speaking of Trump, even now, Trump trusts Putin over leading U.S. officials. Trump reiterated that when it came to whom he trusts, U.S. officials or Putin, the answer should be obvious. It is obvious. That's the problem. Alright. A lot to talk about here. Firstly, why are we still talking about Trump? He hasn't been the president for a long time. But when he comes out with a quote, one, the media is going to go all crazy with it. And the Trump fans are also gonna go crazy with it. So, unfortunately, he is still relevant even now in June, 6 months after he lost the presidency. But what does this mean? So, Trump said that he trusts Putin over the agencies in America. Now, I think a lot of Republicans might actually agree with that, and that is scary. And when they say that's the problem, yeah, why is it that the ex-president, and I probably would guess a lot of the population that supports that ex-president would agree with him, that we would rather trust a foreign autocratic leader than our own intelligence agencies? That is scary. We should be able to trust our intelligence agencies with our lives, but unfortunately it seems like they're the ones who are ruining our lives while Putin is actually trying to speak some truth. Look at this quote from the other day that Putin said. Putin likens Russian crackdown to arresting Capitol rioters. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who was to meet President Joe Biden this week, is suggesting that the hundreds of people arrested for rioting at the U.S. Capitol are being subjected to, quote, persecution for political opinions. This was from the Associated Press, June 14th. Alright. I think the reason a lot of Republicans might actually agree with Putin is because they agree with this statement. That they feel cancel culture being taken off of these social media websites, basically being told that if you're patriotic, you're a white supremacist, if you support the police, you're a white supremacist, if you believe in gender roles, if you're a conservative Christian, you're a misogynistic piece of crap. This is why they don't trust the American institutions and they would rather trust Putin. Because he's saying, yeah, it seems like you guys are persecuting based on political opinions. And it's obvious that it is happening. Of course, if you have the opinions that aren't being persecuted, they will come for you someday, because the opinions that are being persecuted are ever increasingly just becoming, basically, the left is going further and further left, and that means whatever isn't the furthest left is just automatically far right. You can literally see this if you look at, think about 20 years ago, what far right meant. It was super conservative Christian, and now far right is like, you wave a thin blue line flag, you don't necessarily believe that a man can be a woman or a woman can be a man. Like, these are things that, frankly, shouldn't be separating us, but they are. I'm going to keep going on to my next topic, though, because I'm talking kind of about terrorism, or domestic terrorism. Well, we saw this story. New York Post DOJ wants Supreme Court to reinstate death penalty for Boston Marathon bomber. This is Johar Tsarnaev. So, obviously, horrific story, and although I personally believe, I don't think the comparison between the Boston Marathon and 9/11 is very fair. I think 9/11, if you try to, look at the scale of terrorist attack, it is so much higher, but that's not to diminish the horridness of the Boston Marathon bombing. I just think that you can't really put the two at the same level. But they want to reinstate the death penalty for Johar Tsarnaev, the man who planted the backpacks, along with his brother, who is already dead, but planted the backpacks at the Boston Marathon bombing finish line, and unfortunately hurt and killed many, many people. Now, the reason I bring this up, one, let's quickly talk about the death penalty. My personal opinion, if I had to go right now as a 23-year-old, I am against the death penalty. That's not because I don't believe people do horrid things, but the way I view it is I don't like America being the arbiter of life and death, personally. Maybe the states can do it, but the DOJ would be a federal bringing back the death penalty. I don't like America deciding that. My personal belief is that you are allowed to do basically whatever you want with your life. That includes committing crimes. If you do commit a horrid, horrid crime, well, your life is going to be represented accordingly. So if you commit an act of terrorism, like a Boston Marathon bombing, I don't think you should have a good jail sentence. I think you should have a pretty bad jail sentence. No cruel and unusual punishment, no starving anyone to death, no torture. But I think basically you should spend the rest of your days in a jail cell. I think that's clear. Frankly, I think that's a worse punishment than just giving someone death. I mean, if I had to spend 80 years in a cell, or just die now, of course, a lot of people go, okay, but we have to pay for that guy to be in the cell for 80 plus years. I get that. I'd say the solution is just overcrowding in prisons. Let's get rid of things like drug laws, and so we can just start getting a lot of people out of prisons, less people going to the prisons, and it'd probably even out with our taxpayer dollars. So yeah, we'd still be paying the same amount of taxes because we'd have people spending longer times in prison with no death penalty, but less people would be in prison. Now, right here, sorry. Had to look for him a second. These are why I also bring up that story about the death penalty. Now, we know they are changing the definition of what domestic terrorism is. I am not going to sit here and claim that a lot of what's gone on in the past few years are anything equivalent to the Boston Marathon bombing. I think the Boston Marathon bombing is far worse than any of this domestic terrorism we see. But in 2020, we did see months and months of looting, rioting, burning, blocks of cities down. Not the entire city. It's not like Minneapolis or Portland are just gone. But decent little chunks, decent areas of a city, often were getting glass broken, looted, rioting, fires. Again, that is not domestic terrorism, though. Apparently, because it doesn't happen at night. Or what was it? Is that what Garland said? If it happens at night, then it's domestic terrorism. If it's during the day, it was such a stupid response. But Garland announces national strategy to combat domestic terrorism, invoking U.S. Capitol riot. Well, okay, so they're talking about the U.S. Capitol riot. Again, ignoring all that other violence that happened all for months and months before the Capitol riot. But they're saying that domestic terrorism was the Capitol riot. Now look down here. The point I've made through all those experiences that anti-Asian racism has the same source as anti-black racism, white supremacy. So when a black person attacks an Asian person, the encounter is fueled perhaps by racism, but very specifically by white supremacy. White supremacy does not require a white person to perpetuate it. Now, it kind of gets a little bit away from the idea of domestic terrorism, but this is what I'm talking about. Now, I do not think we are suddenly going to start seeing the death penalty come back and then a bunch of white people being put to death. We have heard stories of people being, from January 6th, these prisoners being tortured and it seems like cruel and unusual punishments. That doesn't make me any more hopeful that we're not going towards something like that. Because when you change the definition of domestic terrorism, when you start seeing stories about wanting neighbors and friends and family to snitch on you for your political beliefs, well, if you look at history, it leads to one thing. It's really hard for me to not be a alarmist. I'm not trying to just sit here and stoke fear. But it's about being aware. It's about being aware of what history has taught us so we can see the signs that are happening now and what those signs might lead to. A lot of people think that what's happening now, we're at the kind of beginning stages of it. And they think that we're just going to suddenly stop. No. You have to recognize that this kind of rhetoric doesn't just end. It's going to continue going, and it's going to lead to horrific things. James Lindsay has said that is the precursor, basically, and I don't want to put too many words in his mouth, but this kind of rhetoric is what can lead to genocidal thought. It is not necessarily 100% going to lead to genocide. I think it's more likely to lead to just complete ideological divide and civil war, where you start seeing a crap ton of people moving to what will probably end up being very white areas, because if you're just going to keep saying that white people are bad, well, they're going to go and just say, I'm going to leave these major cities. And you'll have just these two basically major cities, and high densely populated areas will be very, very blue, and rural areas will be very, very red, and there will not be much overlap. And that is kind of scary. That's how I see it going in the future. But it's about understanding all these stories so you can at least have a thought and opinion of your own. To wrap up today, I'm just going to do... Oh, apologize there. Didn't want that up. Yep, sorry. You got to see some nice clickbait. But I have a couple things here. This little section, I'm just calling it, it doesn't make sense. So we have this right here. It was a tweet. I took the name out because I don't try to just target someone for the sake of targeting them. And I don't really think that the person's picture name has to be in here for you to understand. So it says, after my internship ended at the Oregonian last year, I didn't get a single interview until I stopped including my pronouns on my resume and a cover letter. I think about that a lot when I see discussions about diversity in journalism and who gets a fair shake in the industry. So, okay, fair. This person basically said did not get a single interview until they took that out of their resume and cover letter. Personally, I think resume and cover letters are awful ways to judge who should get a job. I think the future is going to be stuff like this. You make an online portfolio of your art, your Instagram page, your YouTube page, whatever it is. But you just go, hey, I'd like to have this job. Well, look at everything I've ever done in my life. Or since I was 16, whatever it might be. If you have this giant resume, yeah, they might not watch every single video, but they can be like, wow, this kid has really dedicated himself to, or herself, or theirselves, to this field. Maybe I should hire them rather than one freaking piece of paper that is such basic information that people lie on anyways. It's not a good system. But I also saw a response to this tweet that said something pretty interesting. And it was saying, if you are the kind of journalist to be putting pronouns on your cover letter and resume, well, they said you don't believe in objective reality. I'm going to walk that back a little bit. I'm going to say, firstly, well, it very clearly shows your biases if you have your pronouns on there. You're very clearly going to cover stories in a way, at least I believe, that leans left, at the very least. If you're the kind of person that already believes that pronouns should be on your cover letter and resume. So, unless you know the news source is just there acknowledging that they're left biased and they want to hire that, but if you're a news source that's trying to be the center, I can get why you wouldn't want to hire someone who you know is not going to be reporting news as truthfully as possible, and they will be giving their biases within their reporting. As for the idea that this person is not in touch with reality, well, they are, with their reality. And this is the big point, too, is we have two separate realities nowadays. To this journalist, with their pronouns, assuming, I guess I didn't see, maybe they were cisgender and just putting the pronouns on there and they were identifying as what you would assume they might be identifying as, but assume they're transgender scenario. Just say it's a transgender journalist. Well, to them, their reality is that their pronouns are he, she, or he, him, or she, hers, whatever. The fact is, in their reality, you can switch and you can have a trans person be a woman in a man's body or a man in a woman's body, and their pronouns can be representative of that. The person who responded saying that they are not in touch with the reality obviously disagrees. In their version of reality, a man cannot be a woman and a woman cannot be a man. It doesn't matter what one you agree with, but it's to recognize that we have the two separate realities now. They're here and they're here to stay. I personally believe the only way through it is just recognizing, all right, you can think your thing, I can think mine, and frankly, as long as we both don't punch each other in the face and just show each other the most decent respect, that's all we can get. I'm not going to convince you suddenly that a man can or cannot be a woman, and you're not going to convince me otherwise. Like, if we're not going to convince each other and not change our realities and merge them, well, let's at least agree to disagree and just have our separate realities, but live within the same reality of existence. Now, I have another thing here that just doesn't make sense, and headphone warning, it's a little bit loud potentially. It is a TikTok. It's about fatphobia. Here you go.
I'm not fatphobic. I just don't want to be fat. That's not how it works. No, seriously, I have no problem with fat people. I think they're beautiful, I'm all for body positivity or whatever. I just don't want to be fat. Actively not wanting to be fat is fatphobia, and therefore, you're fatphobic. And so what? Am I supposed to want to be fat? Literally nobody is saying that. There is little to no evidence that we have any control over our size long term, so we might as well just stop wanting size changes in general. So what am I supposed to do then? Read up on fat liberation, follow fat activists and creators, and commit to unlearning your fat phobia. But...
Alright, so... two things I really want to touch upon there. First off, there's little to no evidence that you have any control over your body over time. What the F are you talking about? Okay, maybe in today's day and age where we're all sedentary as hell and we sit around watching freaking YouTube videos like this one doing literally nothing, but maybe, no. Like, if you work out, that's very, very clear evidence. There's lots of studies that show if you exercise and eat well, you'll be fine, you'll be fit. Now, fitness is a spectrum. There's such things as people who carry a little bit more weight than others and a little bit heftier. That doesn't mean that they're unhealthy, but to say that if you don't want to be fat, you are fatphobic, excuse me? No. Basically, I'm just saying I want to be healthy. So apparently, if you want to be healthy, you're fatphobic. Because you are, again, this goes back to the idea of reality. In my reality, and I'll fully say this is my reality, being overweight is absolutely unhealthy and it's not fatphobic. I don't want to be fat because there's so many negative health consequences that come with excess weight. From diabetes to heart disease to more risk of injury, nothing good comes from it. Cancer goes up, cancer risk I should say, nothing. Yet apparently, I think what the reality of the people who are saying it's fatphobic if you don't want to be fat or if you judge fat people. Basically, although I don't judge fat people, I can be friends with them and I can look at someone and say, you know what? You're a human being who deserves the utmost respect, like every single one of us. But if you try to tell me that you're 300 pounds but you're healthy, I'm going to look at you in the face and, okay, maybe I'll hyperbolic, I'm not going to laugh, but I'm going to be like, okay, clearly you're not living in reality. I'm sorry. You cannot be that overweight and be healthy. It cannot be. I think a lot of times it's people who, frankly, just don't want to face the real, they know it's not reality, but they don't want to face it. They want to demand that people like them. I'm going to tell you a story of a friend of mine. He had Tinder. He was a bit bigger. He's actually lost a lot of weight now, and this might tell you why he did it. He decided to pay for Tinder Gold for a month or whatever, which, if you don't know, Tinder Gold allows you to see who is liking you. Basically, he found out that if you're a fat guy, you don't get any likes. Plain and simple. That's it. He lost a lot of weight, and he's been doing a bit better when it comes to the women. But, on the other hand, what we see, I think, oftentimes, and I'm just going to say, I'm going to make some societal judgments. You don't see a lot of fat guys on Twitter saying, you need to like me even though I'm big. You do see a lot of fat girls saying it's racist, or it's fat. I mean, that was the other day I saw one that said, you're racist if you don't like fat people. Like, what? It's racist? Not even fatphobic anymore, it's racist? But the other people just say you're fatphobic, and basically it's, you must like me for me, and if you don't like me, well, it's because you're a bigot. And it's a lot of women saying that. I think these women don't want to put in the work to actually, carry themselves to be sexually attracted to men, or for men. Men are, I can tell you from my eyes, There's a big range of women that we are attracted to. It is not just the skinniest Barbie dolls. It is a very big range. All you need to be is relatively healthy, and we will want to have sex with you. That's plain and simple. Guys are very, very simple. But you do have a little bit of responsibility, as well as the guys. Guys should also keep themselves in shape. That is not saying guys can just let themselves go and expect the woman to not. But I do think if, like, my future partner, I want them to want to, keep themselves healthy. I think their life will be better if they do it. I think our life will be better if we do it. If we're going to have a relationship, it just makes sense. One of the best reasons to stay fit, it just makes sex so much better. It literally is, like, think about two fat people trying to do it. It's like just flopping, smashing crap together. Like, what? Does it seem fun? I want this to be the best. Like, this is the greatest thing that we have as humans, is sexual intercourse. I want it to be the best possible. I'm going to show you some women. You kind of, these clickbait. What women think they'll look like when they lift weights, what they actually look like. So, of course, on the left, big, beefy woman. I worked at a gym. Yeah, a lot of women think that if they do any upper body, after a week, they're going to look like that. Complete lie. But you know what I want? I want a sexual partner, like the women on the right, who are very, very beautiful, fit women. And you know what? They lift some weights. They take care of themselves because they recognize that being fat is not good for you. It's not fat phobic to want to be healthy. Why do we see Adele losing weight and then she gets all this crap because apparently she's not for the fat people? Like, no, she's for herself. She realized she's an individual and wanted to be healthy. Look at that. It's individuality, not collectivism. The idea of fatness and fat phobia is the idea that we as a collective of fat people must have love for us. You have to like us. There's enough of us that you must like us now. No. We're individuals. You're responsible as an individual to basically keep yourself in whatever shape you want and then face the results of that. So if you want to be fat, cool, be fat. But then if no one finds you attractive, cool, face it. I'm going to end the video there because that's all I got for you today. I'm the progressive conservative because I think we can make progress through the conservation of liberal ideas, but I also go by the name Bailey. Thank you all for watching. I will see you later. Goodbye.